The socket wrench slipped from Olivia Brennan's hand, clattering against the concrete floor of Murphy's truck repair, with a metallic ring that silenced the usual garage chatter. The 42-year-old mechanic instinctively tucked her left hand into her pocket, hiding the space where her index finger should have been. Across the garage, the Special Forces captain's eyes narrowed, his gaze fixed on the spot where her finger was missing. In that moment, 16 years of carefully constructed secrets began to unravel. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Pass me the torque wrench, Liv, Frank called from beneath the lifted RAM 3500. His voice echoed through the humid Montana air, breaking the momentary silence that had fallen over the garage. Olivia nodded, grateful for the distraction. She retrieved the tool from her workbench, consciously keeping her left hand partially closed as she always did, a habit so ingrained she barely noticed it anymore. The four-man Special Forces team waiting for their modified Humvee had noticed, though. She could feel their eyes tracking her movements, calculating, assessing. "We need this vehicle operational by 0800 tomorrow," Captain Marcus Reed stated, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. He stood with perfect military posture, his three teammates forming a semicircle behind him. "Your boss assured us you have the best mechanics in 3 counties. Dale Murphy emerged from his office, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the industrial fans working overtime. "Captain Reed, I guarantee we'll have your vehicle ready. Frank's my senior mechanic. He'll handle everything personally." "Your sign outside says Expert Mechanics," Reed observed, his gaze drifting back to Olivia. "I expected more than a skeleton crew, and a woman with a disability." The word disability hung in the air like smoke. Olivia felt it burn, not because of her missing finger, but because of the assumption that it made her less capable. She'd heard similar comments countless times over her 16 years in Pine Ridge, but today something felt different. "I can fix it," she said quietly. The garage fell silent. In 16 years, Olivia had never volunteered for high-profile work, never challenged the established hierarchy. Her voice, barely above a whisper, somehow carried more authority than Reed's commanding tone. Frank rolled out from under the truck, surprise evident on his oil-streaked face. Pete and Danny, the other mechanics, suddenly found their tools fascinating. Dale's expression tightened with concern. Sergeant Mason, the team's vehicle specialist, stepped forward with theatrical disgust. "Look at this setup. She's using outdated diagnostic equipment. Probably learned mechanics from YouTube." Corporal Jackson laughed, the sound bouncing off the metal walls. "My kid's sister plays with toy trucks, too. Maybe they could swap notes." Olivia's right hand tightened around the torque wrench. These weren't just any hands. Calluses from years of precision work covered her palms. The nails, kept short by necessity, bore permanent oil stains that no amount of scrubbing could remove. And then there was her left hand. 4 fingers instead of 5. The healed-over scar where her index finger had been a constant reminder of a past she'd fled. "The transfer case synchronization is off," she continued, her voice steady despite the mockery. "The secondary gear engages 0, 4 seconds late. It's causing vibration patterns that will compromise the drivetrain under field conditions." Captain Reed paused mid-retort. That level of diagnostic precision required either extraordinary luck or genuine expertise. "She read that on some mechanic forum," Mason insisted. "Anyone can memorize terminology." "Then anyone can fix it," Olivia replied, meeting Reed's skeptical gaze. "But when your vehicle fails during deployment, remember you had the opportunity to prevent it." Dale gripped her shoulder, not roughly, but firmly. Fear radiated from him rather than anger. He needed military contracts. Offending Special Forces operators meant financial ruin for his small-town garage. "Olivia, return to your station. Now," he ordered, the urgency in his voice unmistakable. She looked at her boss, seeing the desperation in his eyes. The same desperation that had driven her to accept this job 16 years ago when she had nowhere else to go and everything to lose. "The front differential is already showing wear patterns," she told Reed directly. "You have maybe 40 miles before permanent damage. Your choice." The Humvee's engine made a distinctive clicking sound, a mechanical protest that confirmed her diagnosis. Frank whistled low. He'd heard that sound before, always followed by extensive repairs, but acknowledging Olivia's expertise meant recognizing 16 years of overlooking her contributions. The social hierarchy of Murphy's truck repair couldn't withstand that revelation. As Olivia retreated to the cramped break room, her hands trembled slightly. 16 years of silence. 16 years of accepting underestimation with grace. 16 years of pretending incompetence to avoid drawing attention. All of it was crumbling because she couldn't watch precision machinery suffer for human prejudice. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Her phone buzzed with a message from Colorado Springs, a number she hadn't seen in years. She deleted it without reading, but the damage was done. Memories she had buried deep began clawing their way to the surface. In her locker, beneath worn coveralls and a thermos that had seen better days, lay her personal toolkit. Professional-grade instruments that cost more than most vehicles in the parking lot. She had brought them from Colorado, unable to abandon tools that felt like extensions of her remaining fingers. Wrapped in a clean shop rag was a photograph. A younger Olivia standing beside a prototype military transport vehicle surrounded by uniformed personnel. She wore a major's insignia in the photo. Her handwriting on the back remained legible despite years of handling. Remember who you are. Expertise doesn't require recognition to be valuable. Outside, she heard the Humvee's engine struggling. Reed shouted orders while Frank and Pete fumbled with diagnostics they didn't fully understand. The sound grew worse. Metal protesting against inevitable failure. Olivia closed her locker, photograph still in her hand. The woman in that picture had been confident, respected, essential. That woman wouldn't recognize the person she'd become, hiding talent to avoid questions, accepting disrespect to maintain anonymity. But perhaps it wasn't too late. Perhaps dignity could be reclaimed, not through confrontation, but through undeniable demonstration of skill. The engine coughed again. The death rattle of precision machinery murdered by ignorance. Olivia made her decision. 3 days later, the tension in Murphy's truck repair had thickened like old motor oil left too long in summer heat. Olivia arrived early, as always, but found the garage buzzing with an energy that made her stomach clench. Word had spread about the Special Forces incident, and not in her favor. "Morning, Liv," Frank called, but his usually friendly tone carried an edge. Pete nodded tersely from behind the parts counter. Only Danny offered his customary warm smile, though even he seemed more cautious than usual. Dale emerged from his office, clipboard in hand, his expression unreadable. "Olivia, we need to talk." Her heart sank. The private conversation she had been dreading was finally here. "Look," Dale began once they were alone in his cramped office surrounded by yellowed invoices and faded automotive calendars. "That thing with the military guys. It's got people talking. Customers are asking questions." "What kind of questions?" Olivia asked, though she already knew. "About whether we're running a professional operation or some kind of..." He paused, searching for diplomatic words. "Training program for unqualified mechanics." The words stung because they were so far from the truth. Olivia had been fixing vehicles since she could hold a wrench. She had earned her mechanical engineering degree with honors and specialized in military transport systems. She had once led the design team for the Army's next-generation tactical vehicles. But here in Pine Ridge, her resume began and ended with oil changes and tire rotations. "I fixed their vehicle," she said quietly. "It runs better now than when it left the factory." "That's not the point." Dale's voice carried a frustration that wasn't entirely directed at her. "This is a small town, Olivia. People talk. Mrs. Peterson heard from her nephew who works at the base that you supposedly embarrassed some Special Forces guys, made them look foolish. I did my job. Your job is what I say it is." The words came out harsher than Dale intended. He softened slightly, but the damage was done. "Look, I like you. You're reliable, punctual, and you don't cause trouble. But I've got a business to run. The military contracts alone keep us afloat." Olivia understood the unspoken message. Stay invisible, or find another job. In Pine Ridge, there weren't many options for a woman who worked with her hands, especially one with a missing finger that raised questions she couldn't answer. I understand, she said, though the words tasted like copper in her mouth. Good. I'm glad we're on the same page. Dale stood, signaling the conversation was over. Oh, and Olivia. Captain Reed is bringing his team back this afternoon. Some kind of follow-up inspection. I want Frank handling it personally. As Olivia returned to the garage floor, she caught fragments of conversation that stopped abruptly when she appeared. Words like showing off and knows her place floated through the air like toxic fumes. She had heard them before in different contexts in different places, but they always carried the same message. Know your boundaries. Danny approached her station as she began working on a routine brake job. You okay, Liv? She nodded, not trusting her voice. Danny was the only one who had ever seemed genuinely curious about her background, the only one who looked past the surface assumptions that defined her in this place. That was impressive the other day, he said quietly, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. I've been working on trucks for 12 years, and I've never seen anyone diagnose a transfer case issue that fast. Just lucky, Olivia deflected. But Danny shook his head. Nah, that wasn't luck. That was skill. Real skill. He paused, studying her face. Where did you learn to work like that? The question hung in the air between them. Olivia had been waiting 16 years for someone to ask, to show genuine curiosity about her background. But now that the moment had arrived, she found herself paralyzed by the weight of explanation. Around, she said finally. You pick things up. Danny nodded, accepting her evasion with grace. Well, whoever taught you knew what they were doing. That Humvee was running like a dream when it left here. As if summoned by their conversation, the rumble of military-grade engines filled the garage. Through the open bay doors, Olivia saw Captain Reed climbing out of a transport truck, his 3 teammates following. Her stomach tightened as she recognized the set of his shoulders, the focused intensity that radiated from him. Frank, Dale called out, but his voice cracked with nervous energy. Your VIP is here. Reed strode into the garage like he owned it, his gaze sweeping over the various workstations before settling on Olivia. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and she saw something there that hadn't been present during their first encounter. Uncertainty mixed with curiosity. Mr. Murphy, Reed said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. I need to speak with whoever worked on our vehicle. That would be Frank, Dale replied quickly, gesturing toward the senior mechanic. He's our most experienced. No, Reed's interruption was sharp. I need to speak with her. He pointed directly at Olivia, the woman who made the diagnosis. The garage fell silent again, but this time the quiet felt different, expectant, dangerous. Olivia set down her wrench and walked toward the group, her heart pounding but her steps steady. She had learned long ago that showing fear only invited more scrutiny. You wanted to see me? She asked, her voice calm despite the chaos in her chest. Reed studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Our vehicle's been running for 3 days now. Smooth as silk. Better than it has in months. Good, Olivia replied, unsure where this was leading. The thing is, Reed continued, I've been thinking about what you said about the transfer case synchronization. About the vibration patterns. He paused. That's not common knowledge. That's specialized information. Olivia remained silent, waiting. So I made some calls, talked to some people. Reed's voice grew quieter, more intense. People who know about advanced military transport systems, the kind of technology that's not exactly available to your average small-town mechanic. The blood drained from Olivia's face. She had been so focused on fixing the vehicle that she hadn't considered the implications of revealing her knowledge. In her old life, such expertise would have been expected, even celebrated. Here, it made her dangerous. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but even to her own ears, the denial sounded weak. Reed's eyes dropped to her left hand, to the missing index finger that she unconsciously kept partially hidden. And then there's that, he said quietly. A very distinctive injury, the kind that might happen in a very specific way. Olivia's pulse quickened. 16 years of careful anonymity threatened to collapse around her. The military keeps detailed records, you know, Reed continued, especially of personnel with specialized technical knowledge. His gaze met hers, direct and challenging. especially personnel who disappeared under unusual circumstances. Dale looked between them, confusion evident on his face. "What's going on here? Olivia's worked for me for 16 years. She's just a mechanic." Captain Reed never broke eye contact with Olivia. "Is she? Or is she Major Olivia Brennan, formerly of the Army Corps of Engineers, Special Technical Division? Reported missing in action after a classified operation in 2008? The garage went completely still. Frank dropped a wrench, the clang reverberating through the sudden silence. Pete and Danny stared at Olivia as if seeing her for the first time. "You've got the wrong person," Olivia said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I don't think so," Reed replied. "Your fingerprints are all over that Humvee. Standard procedure. We dust sensitive equipment when it returns from civilian repair facilities. Those prints match our records." He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "The question is, why would a decorated officer with your qualifications disappear to work as a small-town mechanic for 16 years? What happened during Operation Crosswind that was worth abandoning your entire identity?" The name of the operation hit Olivia like a physical blow. Memories she had suppressed for 16 years flooded back. The prototype vehicle, the remote testing facility, the explosion that took her finger, and the discovery that had changed everything. "I think this conversation needs to happen elsewhere," Reed said, noticing her reaction. "My commanding officer would very much like to speak with you." Dale stepped between them, protective despite his confusion. "Now wait just a minute. Olivia works for me. You can't just come in here and make these wild accusations." "It's not an accusation, Mr. Murphy," Reed interrupted. "It's a fact. And this is a matter of national security." Olivia felt the walls of her carefully constructed life crumbling around her. 16 years of hiding, of diminishing herself, of pretending to be less than she was. All of it collapsing because she couldn't stand by and watch a machine fail when she knew exactly how to fix it. "Dale," she said quietly, "I need to handle this." "Handle what?" Dale demanded. "Olivia, what's going on? Who are these people?" She looked at the man who had given her shelter when she needed it most, who had provided her a livelihood without asking too many questions. He deserved some explanation, but she couldn't give him the full truth. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "I used to work for the military," she said carefully. "A long time ago. There was an incident. I left. It's complicated." "Complicated?" Dale's voice rose. "You've been working in my garage for 16 years. How complicated could it be?" Captain Reed intervened. "Mr. Murphy, I understand this is confusing, but I need you to trust that this is important. Major Brennan." "Don't call me that," Olivia snapped, her composure finally cracking. "That person doesn't exist anymore." "The Department of Defense disagrees," Reed replied calmly. "As does General Harrison, who's been looking for you since 2008. The mention of Harrison's name made Olivia's blood run cold. Thomas Harrison had been a colonel during Operation Crosswind. The man who had ordered the cover-up, who had threatened her when she refused to sign the falsified reports. "Harrison is a general now?" she asked, unable to hide her disbelief. Reed nodded. "For the past 8 years. He heads the Advanced Combat Systems Division." "Your division, once upon a time." Olivia felt trapped. If Harrison had sent these men, then her carefully constructed anonymity hadn't been enough. He had found her, and whatever he wanted couldn't be good. "I'm not going anywhere with you," she stated firmly. "Whatever Harrison wants, I'm not interested." "It's not that simple," Reed countered. "The technology you were developing before your departure has become crucial to current operations. The prototypes never worked properly after you left. No one could replicate your designs." Danny stepped forward, confusion evident on his face. "Liv, what's he talking about? What designs?" Olivia looked around the garage that had been her sanctuary for 16 years, at the people who knew her only as a quiet, competent mechanic who kept to herself. The life she had built was simple, anonymous, and safe, but it had been built on omission, on hiding her true capabilities, on denying the knowledge that might have helped countless soldiers. "The next generation tactical transport system," she said finally, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "I designed the propulsion and suspension systems for the Army's autonomous ground vehicles. Prototype units that could navigate rough terrain without human drivers, deliver supplies to dangerous areas without risking lives. Frank shook his head in disbelief. You're saying you're some kind of military engineer? That's crazy. Is it? Reed asked. How else would she know exactly what was wrong with our vehicle without running a single diagnostic test? How else would she understand systems that even our dedicated mechanics struggle with? Dale sank onto a nearby stool, trying to process this revelation. 16 years, he muttered. 16 years and I had you changing oil filters. I needed to disappear, Olivia said quietly. I needed someplace where no one would look for a former Army major with an engineering doctorate. Someplace where I could use my hands without raising questions about my background. But why? Danny asked, the question everyone was thinking. Why disappear at all? Before Olivia could answer, the garage door opened again. 2 men in dark suits entered, their movements precise and professional. One held up an identification badge. Special Agent Donovan, Department of Defense, he announced. This is Special Agent Keller. We're here for Major Olivia Brennan. Olivia's knees nearly buckled. The past she'd tried so hard to escape was colliding with the present she'd built, and she wasn't sure either would survive the impact. I need to make a phone call, she said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. Agent Donovan considered this for a moment, then nodded. One call. We'll be waiting. Olivia stepped outside the garage, her hands shaking as she scrolled through her contacts. She found the number she'd been avoiding for 16 years and pressed call. Westfield and Associates, came the crisp, professional voice. I need to speak with Colonel Westfield. Tell him it's Olivia. Tell him it's about Operation Crosswind. While she waited for her former commanding officer to come on the line, Olivia watched through the garage windows as Frank, Pete, and Danny pretended to work, while obviously straining to hear the conversation with the federal agents. Dale sat slumped in his chair, probably calculating how much a government investigation would cost his business. Olivia? James Westfield's voice was cautious but not unfriendly. I haven't heard from you in 16 years. I know, James. I need help. DOD agents are here, asking questions about Crosswind. Harrison found me. A long pause. Where are you? Pine Ridge, Montana. I've been working as a mechanic. Another pause. A mechanic. With your mind, you've been changing oil. It was safe, she replied. Until now. Listen carefully. Westfield's voice dropped. Harrison is under investigation. Internal Affairs has been building a case against him for months. The evidence you gathered before you disappeared. The design flaws he ordered covered up. The safety protocols he bypassed. It's all coming to light. Olivia's knees nearly buckled. What kind of evidence? The kind that proves you were right all along. The kind that's going to end several promising careers, including Harrison's. The prototypes were defective, Olivia said, memories flooding back. The autonomous navigation system had fatal flaws. Vehicles could malfunction, target friendlies run off course. I refused to sign off on field testing. And Harrison forced the tests anyway, Westfield confirmed. There were incidents, Olivia. Soldiers died. Just like you predicted. As she ended the call, Olivia realized that her quiet life in Pine Ridge was over. The past she'd tried so hard to escape was rushing toward her present, and the collision would be spectacular. She walked back into the garage, straightening her shoulders. If her anonymity was gone, then perhaps it was time to stop hiding. Gentlemen, she said to the agents, I think it's time we had a more detailed conversation. The agents exchanged glances, sensing the shift in her demeanor. And Captain Reed, she continued, turning to face the Special Forces officer, you should know that the man who sent you is the reason I disappeared in the first place. General Harrison isn't looking for me because he needs my expertise. He's looking for me because I'm the only one who can prove he knowingly deployed defective equipment that killed American soldiers. Reed's expression changed from suspicion to confusion. What are you talking about? Operation Crosswind, Olivia replied, holding up her left hand, displaying the missing finger she had hidden for so long. This is what happens when an autonomous vehicle's recognition system fails. It's what happens when safety protocols are ignored in favor of meeting deployment deadlines. It's what happens when officers value their careers more than their soldiers' lives. She turned to face the DoD agents, her voice steady and clear. I didn't desert. I didn't abandon my post. I went into hiding because Harrison threatened to have me court-martialed if I didn't falsify test results. Because when I refused, he made it clear that my next accident wouldn't just cost me a finger. The conference room at the Pine Ridge Sheriff's Department had seen better days. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the scarred table where Olivia sat facing Agents Donovan and Keller. Captain Reed stood by the door, his posture rigid but his expression troubled. Dale Murphy fidgeted in a chair nearby, his face pale with worry about what revelations might destroy his business. Before we begin, Agent Donovan said, setting a digital recorder on the table, I want to be clear that you're not under arrest or suspicion of wrongdoing. However, given the nature of the technology involved and the accusations you've made, we need to understand exactly what happened during Operation Crosswind. Olivia nodded, her hands folded calmly in her lap. After 16 years of hiding, the prospect of telling the truth felt both terrifying and liberating. My name is Major Olivia Ann Brennan, she began, the military title feeling foreign on her tongue after so many years. Until 2008, I was the lead engineer for the Army's Autonomous Ground Transport Initiative, codenamed Crosswind. Dale's jaw dropped. Major? Agent Keller leaned forward, suddenly more interested. Major Brennan, he repeated, consulting his tablet. I see. That explains a great deal. Explains what? Dale asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Major Brennan held 12 patents in advanced military transport systems, Agent Donovan replied. By age 35, she had designed the autonomous navigation protocols that were supposed to revolutionize battlefield logistics. Her work on terrain adaptive suspension systems saved the Department of Defense an estimated $300 million in vehicle replacement costs. Olivia felt a strange mix of pride and pain hearing her accomplishments recited like a resume. That was a long time ago. Not that long, Agent Keller interjected. Your designs are still the foundation for current autonomous systems. That's why Harrison has been trying to locate you. The flaws you identified were never fully addressed. Dale stared at Olivia as if seeing her for the first time. You're that Major Brennan? The one who won the Presidential Innovation Award? I remember seeing something about you on the news years ago. They said you were killed in a training accident. That's what they wanted people to believe, Olivia said quietly. It was easier than explaining why a decorated officer would suddenly abandon her post. What happened? Captain Reed asked, though his tone suggested he was beginning to piece it together. Olivia took a deep breath and began the story she'd never told anyone in Pine Ridge. She spoke about Operation Crosswind, the ambitious project to develop fully autonomous supply vehicles that could navigate hostile territory without risking human drivers. About the promising early tests and the pressure to move to field deployments before the systems were ready. The navigation systems had a critical flaw, she continued. Under certain conditions, dust storms, heavy rain, complex terrain, I could misidentify objects. Friendly forces could be classified as obstacles to be avoided or, worse, as threats to be neutralized. I identified the problem 3 months before scheduled deployment, submitted reports, requested additional testing time, developed potential fixes. Colonel Harrison, General Harrison now, was under pressure from Pentagon officials who had already promised the technology to combat commanders. He ordered me to certify the systems as combat-ready despite the flaws. When I refused, he authorized a demonstration without my knowledge. I discovered it by accident and tried to stop the test. That's when... She held up her left hand, displaying the healed-over scar where her index finger had been. The vehicle identified me as an obstacle and attempted to create a path. I was lucky it was just my finger. Harrison covered it up, she continued. Classified it as a mechanical failure during routine maintenance. When I threatened to report the truth, he made it clear that my career, my reputation, and possibly my freedom were at stake. He had the authority to have me court-martialed for sabotage if I didn't cooperate. So you ran, Agent Donovan concluded. I disappeared, Olivia corrected. I took what evidence I could gather, encrypted it, and sent copies to people I trusted. Then I created a new identity and found someplace where no one would look for a former Army engineer. A truck repair shop in Montana, Dale said, still processing this revelation. Somewhere, I could still work with my hands, still solve problems, just without the risk of soldiers dying because of compromised safety protocols. Captain Reed found his voice. If what you're saying is true, why hasn't any of this evidence come to light in 16 years? Because Harrison rose through the ranks quickly, Agent Keller explained. He cultivated powerful allies. The witnesses were scattered, reassigned, or discharged. The paper trail was buried under layers of classification. Until 3 months ago, Agent Donovan added, when one of the autonomous prototypes based on the original Crosswind design malfunctioned during an exercise in Afghanistan, 2 soldiers were killed, 7 injured. It triggered an internal investigation that led to questions about the original program. And to you, Captain Reed said, looking at Olivia with new understanding. General Harrison has been trying to locate you since the investigation began, Agent Keller confirmed, officially to consult on technical issues with the current generation of vehicles. And unofficially? Olivia asked, though she already knew the answer. Unofficially to ensure you couldn't testify about what happened 16 years ago. Dale shook his head in amazement. 16 years. You've been here 16 years, and I had you changing oil filters while you could have been designing the future of military transport. I wasn't ready for that life again, Olivia admitted. I needed time to heal, to figure out who I was without the military defining me. And now? Agent Donovan asked. Olivia looked around the Stark conference room, thinking about the garage where she'd spent 16 years rebuilding not just engines, but herself. She thought about Danny, the only person who had consistently treated her with respect. About the satisfaction of working with her hands, of solving problems without politics or institutional pressure. Now I know exactly who I am, she said firmly. I'm an engineer who's learned the value of patience. I'm someone who can work with her hands and her mind. I'm a woman who won't be defined by other people's expectations or limitations. She paused, meeting each man's gaze. I'm ready to tell the truth. All of it, Agent Keller smiled. Then let's talk about your future. The Justice Department has convened a special inquiry into Operation Crosswind. Your testimony would be invaluable. What about Harrison? Olivia asked. General Harrison will be placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation, Agent Donovan replied. The evidence you gathered 16 years ago, combined with recent incidents, makes a compelling case. And after the investigation, what happens to me then? That's entirely up to you, Captain Reed interjected. But speaking personally, the Army's Tactical Vehicle Division would benefit enormously from your expertise, especially your ability to identify problems that others miss. Olivia considered this. For 16 years, she had dreamed of vindication, of the truth finally coming to light. But now that the moment had arrived, she felt strangely detached from the desire for justice. What mattered more was ensuring that no more soldiers died because of flawed technology. I want to think about it, she said finally. All of it. The testimony, the job offers, everything. I've been making decisions based on fear for too long. I want to make this choice from a position of strength. Of course, Agent Donovan said, standing. Take your time. But Major Brennan, Olivia, don't take too long. The country needs engineers like you. People who are willing to stand up for safety and truth, even when it costs them personally. As the agents gathered their materials, Dale turned to Olivia with a mixture of awe and regret. I owe you an apology, he said. I should have recognized your talent. I should have... You gave me work when I needed it, Olivia interrupted. You gave me a place to heal. That's not something to apologize for. What happens now? To the garage, I mean. Olivia smiled, the first genuine smile she'd worn in days. Now you hire better mechanics. You promote Danny to senior technician. He's got excellent instincts. And you remember, that talent comes in all forms, not just the ones you expect. As they left the sheriff's office, Olivia felt the weight of 16 years of secrecy lifting from her shoulders. The truth was finally out, and she was still standing. More than that, she was ready to reclaim her identity, not as the person she had been before, but as someone stronger, wiser, and more determined to make a difference. The drive back to the garage was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Dale seemed lost in thought, probably reconsidering every assumption he'd made about his employees. Olivia watched the familiar landscape of Pine Ridge roll past, knowing that everything had changed in the span of a few hours. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Major Brennan, this is Captain Reed. Heard you might be rejoining the technical division. Outstanding work on our vehicle. Hope you'll consider coming back. The Army needs engineers who can think independently. Semper Fi." Olivia smiled, tucking the phone away. For the first time in 16 years, her future felt wide open with possibilities. The question now wasn't whether she was qualified for the opportunities being offered. It was which one would let her make the biggest difference in protecting the lives of soldiers who deserved equipment that wouldn't fail them in the field. The news spread through Pine Ridge like wildfire. Within hours of the federal agent's visit, everyone in town knew that the quiet mechanic at Murphy's truck repair was actually a decorated Army major who had been living in hiding. The story had everything a small town craved: mystery, government intrigue, and the dramatic revelation that the woman they'd all underestimated was actually a genius. Olivia arrived at work the next morning to find a crowd gathered outside the garage. Local news vans occupied the parking lot, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like mechanical flowers. Reporters thrust microphones at her as she tried to reach the front door. "Major Brennan, what's it like being vindicated after 16 years? Will you be returning to the Army? How does it feel to know your warnings about defective equipment were correct?" Olivia pushed through the crowd without comment, but inside the garage, she found even more chaos. The phone rang incessantly with calls from reporters, military officials, and former colleagues. Frank and Pete stood near the coffee machine, their faces mixing curiosity with something that looked like shame. "Morning, Major Brennan," Frank said awkwardly, emphasizing her title. "It's still Olivia," she replied, pulling on her coveralls. "Nothing's changed." "Everything's changed," Pete muttered. "We've been working next to a military engineer for 16 years and didn't know it." Danny approached with a cup of coffee and a gentle smile. "How are you holding up?" "Better than expected," Olivia admitted. "Though I could do without the media circus." Dale emerged from his office looking haggard. "Olivia, I've had 23 calls this morning. 7 from military contractors, 8 from news outlets, and the rest from people wanting to know if we're hiring genius mechanics. I'm sorry about the disruption." "Don't apologize." Dale's voice carried genuine remorse. "I've been thinking all night about how we treated you, how I treated you. Making you change oil and rotate tires when you could have been—" "Dale, stop." Olivia's voice was firm but kind. "I needed those 16 years. I needed to remember that there's dignity in all work, that my value as a person wasn't tied to my military rank or academic credentials. Working here taught me that." Before Dale could respond, the garage door chimed. A woman in an impeccable military uniform entered, her bearing unmistakably that of a high-ranking officer. Olivia recognized the insignia immediately. "Brigadier General." "Major Brennan," the woman said with a crisp nod. "I'm Brigadier General Eleanor Garrison, Army Corps of Engineers." The garage fell silent. Even the reporters outside seemed to sense the importance of this moment. "General Garrison," Olivia replied, instinctively straightening her posture despite her oil-stained coveralls. "I've been trying to reach you," Garrison said. "We need to talk. I'm working right now." "This is more important than—" Garrison paused, looking around the garage with barely concealed surprise. "This is more important than whatever you're doing here." The condescension in her tone was unmistakable. Olivia felt her co-workers stiffen, their eyes fixed on this exchange between two very different worlds. "My work is important," Olivia said quietly. "All honest work is important." Garrison's expression softened slightly, as if she were dealing with someone who didn't understand the stakes. "Of course it is. But you're brilliant, Olivia. You belong in research and development, not in some small-town garage. 16 years ago, the Army told me I belonged in a court-martial for refusing to certify flawed equipment. Now suddenly I belong in R&D again. That was different, Garrison replied. We were misled by Harrison's reports. Now we know the truth. You knew the truth then, Olivia countered, her voice growing stronger. You just chose to believe the version that was more convenient for the deployment schedule. Garrison's professional mask slipped, revealing the calculating officer beneath. Olivia, be reasonable. We're prepared to offer you full reinstatement, your previous rank plus promotion to lieutenant colonel, and complete autonomy over your projects. You'd have your own laboratory, unlimited research budget, and a team of the best engineers in the military. And in exchange? In exchange, you come home where you belong. You stop this. Garrison gestured around the garage dismissively. Whatever this is. You resume your rightful place in the engineering corps. Olivia looked around the garage at Dale, who had given her work when she was desperate, at Danny, who had treated her with respect from day one, at Frank and Pete, who were finally beginning to understand what they'd witnessed, at the familiar tools and machinery that had been her companions through the darkest period of her life. This is my home, she said simply. These are my people. Garrison's smile became strained. Olivia, I understand you're emotional about this situation. It's natural to feel some loyalty to the place that sheltered you. But let's be practical. What future do you have here? What problems can you solve? What innovations can you create? I can teach, Olivia said, the words coming to her as she spoke them. I can train the next generation of mechanics to think like engineers. I can bridge the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical application. You want to waste your talents on automotive education? Garrison's voice rose with incredulity. I want to use my talents to make a difference. Real difference, not just military capabilities. Garrison's expression hardened. You're making a mistake, Olivia. The Army has a long memory. If you turn down this opportunity, there might not be another one. Is that a threat? It's reality. The military world is smaller than you think. Reputation matters. Olivia felt a familiar chill, the same intimidation tactics that had been used against her 16 years ago. But this time, she wasn't alone. This time, she had people who believed in her worth beyond her ability to generate patents and defense contracts. My reputation is my own to build, Olivia said. And I choose to build it on integrity, not on bowing to institutional pressure. Danny stepped forward, his voice steady. The lady said no. Maybe it's time you left. Garrison looked at him with undisguised contempt. I wasn't speaking to you. You're in our garage, disrespecting our friend, Danny replied. That makes it my business. Frank and Pete moved closer, their solidarity surprising even themselves. Dale straightened behind the counter, his face resolute. I think, Dale said quietly, you should leave, General. Olivia's made her position clear. Garrison's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. She wasn't accustomed to being dismissed by people she considered beneath her station. This is a mistake, Olivia. A career-ending mistake. Then it's my mistake to make, Olivia replied calmly. As Garrison turned to leave, she paused at the door. The Justice Department's inquiry won't last forever. When you're ready to be realistic about your future, you know where to find me. The door slammed behind her, leaving the garage in stunned silence. Through the windows, they watched Garrison stride past the reporters without comment, her posture rigid with fury. Well, Frank said finally, that was something. You okay? Danny asked Olivia, concern evident in his voice. Olivia looked around at the faces surrounding her. Not colleagues, she realized, but friends. People who had stood up for her when it mattered, who had chosen loyalty over opportunity. I'm perfect, she said, and for the first time in years, she meant it completely. The phone rang again, jarring everyone back to reality. Dale answered with a weary sigh. Murphy's truck repair. Yes, she's here. No, she's not giving interviews. Because she's working, that's why. As Dale fielded another reporter's call, Olivia's phone buzzed with a text from Agent Donovan. Justice Department hearing scheduled for Monday if you're interested. No pressure, but your testimony is crucial. Your choice entirely. Olivia stared at the message, weighing her options. The Justice Department inquiry represented everything she'd once fought for. Accountability, transparency, the chance to ensure no more soldiers died because of compromised safety protocols. It was the vindication she'd been denied 16 years ago, offered back to her on a silver platter. But as she looked around the garage, she realized that her priorities had evolved. 16 years ago, justice meant exposing corruption and fixing flawed systems. Now justice meant something different entirely. "Danny," she said suddenly, "how would you feel about going back to school?" He looked puzzled. "What kind of school?" "Engineering school. Part-time while you work. I could help you with the coursework." Danny's eyes widened. "You think I could do that?" "I think you have natural instincts that can't be taught. The rest is just mathematics and physics. We can handle that." "What about Frank and Pete?" Danny asked. "They've got experience, too." Olivia looked at the two men who were listening with growing interest. "Anyone who wants to learn. We could start an apprenticeship program here. Combine hands-on experience with engineering theory." Dale hung up the phone, his expression thoughtful. "You're talking about turning this place into some kind of training center?" "I'm talking about creating something new. A place where theoretical knowledge meets practical application, where people learn to think like engineers while working like mechanics." "And you'd give up the Justice Department inquiry for this?" Dale asked, incredulous. Olivia considered the question carefully. "The Department of Justice has thousands of witnesses. They'll complete their investigation with or without me. But here I could make a difference that lasts generations." Her phone rang. Another unfamiliar number. She answered reluctantly. "Major Brennan, this is Colonel James Westfield, Army Corps of Engineers. I wanted to discuss your situation." "Colonel Westfield, I'm honored that you called, but before you make your pitch, let me explain what I'm planning." "I'm listening." "I'm not coming back to the Army. Not in the traditional sense. But I am going to use my knowledge. I'm establishing a training program for mechanics who want to understand the engineering principles behind what they're fixing. People with practical experience who can bridge the gap between theory and application." There was a long pause on the line. "That's not what I expected. I've spent 16 years learning that sometimes the most valuable expertise comes from unexpected places. The mechanic who can diagnose a problem just by listening to an engine. The high school dropout who intuitively understands hydraulic systems without formal training. These are the people who keep things running when theories fail. And you want to teach them engineering principles? I want to give them the language and tools to express what they already understand. And in the process, create a new generation of problem solvers who aren't limited by traditional educational pathways." Another pause. "The Army needs that kind of thinking, Olivia. We've become too specialized, too compartmentalized. Field mechanics can't communicate with engineers. Engineers design systems without understanding practical limitations." "Exactly," Olivia replied, feeling a surge of excitement. "That's the gap I want to bridge." "What if," Westfield's voice took on a speculative tone, "what if the Army supported your program? Not controlling it, but partnering with it. Sending our mechanics to train with you. Providing equipment and resources." The offer hung in the air like a bridge between her old life and her new one. Olivia looked around the garage again, seeing possibilities she hadn't considered before. "Could I bring a team?" she asked. "Local mechanics who understand both the practical and theoretical sides? If they can pass security clearance, absolutely. We believe diverse backgrounds produce better solutions." Olivia met Danny's eyes, seeing excitement and hope there. She looked at Frank and Pete, who were following the conversation with growing interest. Finally, she looked at Dale, who was beginning to smile as he understood what she was considering. "Colonel Westfield," Olivia said slowly, "I think we might be able to work something out." 2 weeks later, Murphy's truck repair had transformed into something unprecedented in Pine Ridge's history. Army engineers had arrived to assess the facility's potential as a training center. While reporters continued to document Olivia's unconventional choice to remain in small-town Montana, the most dramatic change was Danny's enrollment in an accelerated engineering program. Olivia had spent countless hours helping him navigate calculus and physics, watching his natural mechanical intuition flourish when supported by theoretical knowledge. His progress astonished even the university professors who reviewed his work. "I never thought I was smart enough for this," Danny confided during one of their late-night study sessions. "Intelligence isn't about what you thought you couldn't do," Olivia replied. "It's about what you discover you can do when someone believes in you." Frank and Pete had also signed up for the program, though their progress was slower. Frank struggled with mathematics but excelled at systems thinking. Pete had an intuitive grasp of materials science that impressed Olivia's Army contacts. Both men approached their studies with the determination of people who had been given a second chance at dreams they'd never dared to pursue. The transformation wasn't limited to education. Word of Olivia's expertise had spread throughout the military community, bringing a steady stream of complex repair jobs to the garage. Vehicles arrived from bases across the Northwest, their problems ranging from simple maintenance to sophisticated diagnostic challenges that would have stumped most commercial shops. Captain Reed had become a regular visitor, bringing increasingly challenging projects and spreading word about the garage's capabilities among his Special Forces contacts. His initial skepticism had evolved into genuine respect, and he often stayed to observe Olivia's diagnostic methods. "I've never seen anyone approach mechanical problems the way you do," he told her one afternoon while watching her work on a reconnaissance vehicle's transmission. "You think 3 steps ahead of the problem." "Engineering is just applied problem-solving," Olivia replied, adjusting a sensor array with microscopic precision. "The secret is understanding that every problem has multiple solutions. You just have to find the elegant one." But not everyone in Pine Ridge welcomed the changes. Some longtime residents resented the influx of military personnel and media attention. Others questioned whether Olivia's presence was good for the town's traditional character. The tension came to a head during a town council meeting where several business owners voiced their concerns. "This used to be a quiet place," complained Martha Peterson, who owned the diner across from the garage. "Now we've got reporters and military vehicles everywhere. It's disrupting our way of life." "It's also bringing money into the community," countered Mayor Robert Williams. "The hotel's booked solid for the first time in years, and local restaurants are seeing record business." "Money isn't everything," Martha shot back. "Some of us value peace and quiet over profit." Olivia had attended the meeting at Mayor Williams' request, though she'd tried to avoid the spotlight. When called upon to address the concerns, she stood slowly, feeling the weight of dozens of gazes. "I understand the disruption my presence has caused," she began. "That was never my intention. I came here 16 years ago looking for anonymity, and I found something much more valuable. I found a community that accepted me without knowing my credentials." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "The attention will die down eventually. Reporters will move on to other stories, and the Army will establish its training protocols. But what we're building here, the combination of practical skills and theoretical knowledge, that will last." "What exactly are you building?" asked Tom Bradley, a local rancher. "Opportunity," Olivia replied. "Danny Martinez will graduate next year with a mechanical engineering degree while maintaining his job and supporting his family. Frank Williams is discovering talents he never knew he had. Pete Patterson is learning that intelligence comes in many forms." She looked around the room, making eye contact with skeptics and supporters alike. 16 years ago, I thought my career was over. This community gave me a chance to rebuild my life. Now I want to give others the same opportunity, the chance to discover what they're capable of when someone believes in them." An elderly man in the back row raised his hand. "What happens when the Army gets tired of this experiment? What happens to all these fancy programs when you move on to bigger things?" The question struck at Olivia's deepest fears. She had built her new life around stability and community, but her growing responsibilities threatened to pull her back into the world of military politics and competing priorities. "That's why we're building something sustainable," she said. "The apprenticeship program will continue with or without me. The training protocols we're developing will become standard procedure, and the people we're educating will carry this knowledge forward long after I'm gone." After the meeting, Olivia walked through downtown Pine Ridge, reflecting on how much had changed since that first encounter with Captain Reed. The town still maintained its small-town character, but it now hummed with new energy and purpose. Her phone buzzed with a message from James Westfield. "Harrison resigned. Justice Department found evidence of falsified safety reports. Your vindication is complete." Olivia stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. The vindication felt hollow compared to the satisfaction of watching Danny master differential equations, or seeing Frank's confidence grow as he tackled increasingly complex repairs. At the garage, she found Colonel Westfield reviewing the latest training protocols with Dale and several Army officials. The conversation stopped when she entered. "Major Brennan," Westfield said, "we were just discussing the next phase of expansion. The success here has exceeded all expectations." "What kind of expansion?" Olivia asked cautiously. "We want to replicate this model at other locations. Civilian-military partnerships that combine practical training with advanced engineering education. You'd oversee the entire program. Olivia felt the familiar pull of larger responsibilities, bigger challenges, greater impact. It was exactly the kind of opportunity she'd dreamed of 16 years ago. That sounds impressive, she said carefully. But I've made commitments here, to the people I'm training, to this community. Of course, Westfield agreed. We're not asking you to abandon what you've built. We want you to expand it. Think of it as taking your successful model nationwide. The offer was tempting, but Olivia had learned to be wary of opportunities that demanded everything while promising even more. She'd built her new life on the principle that success meant more than professional achievement. It meant having roots, maintaining relationships, and making a difference in individual lives. I need time to consider this, she said finally. Naturally. But, Olivia, may I call you Olivia? What you've accomplished here is remarkable. The combination of practical skills and theoretical knowledge, the integration of civilian and military training, the focus on individual development within a community framework. It's revolutionary. As the Army officials left, Olivia remained in the garage, surrounded by the familiar sounds and smells that had defined her life for 16 years. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new decisions about the direction of her life. But tonight, she was exactly where she belonged, in a small-town garage where talent was nurtured, dignity was respected, and dreams were rebuilt one person at a time. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Danny. Just aced my thermodynamics exam. Thanks for believing in me, Professor. Olivia smiled, tucking the phone away. Some victories were measured in patents and military commendations. Others were measured in transformed lives and realized potential. She was beginning to understand which kind mattered more. 3 months later, the garage had become something entirely unique in the American automotive landscape. A hybrid facility where cutting-edge military technology met small-town values, where theoretical knowledge was tempered by practical wisdom, and where second chances bloomed into extraordinary achievements. Danny had completed his associate degree with honors and was now enrolled in a full bachelor's program while working as Olivia's lead technician. Frank had discovered a gift for hydraulic systems that impressed even veteran Army engineers. Pete had overcome his mathematical anxieties to become an expert in electronic diagnostics. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous, but success, Olivia had learned, often attracted the wrong kind of attention. The challenge came from an unexpected source: Congressman William Hartley, whose district included Pine Ridge. Hartley had built his political career on opposing what he called government overreach and taxpayer waste. The Army's partnership with the civilian garage struck him as a perfect target for his next campaign. Ladies and gentlemen, Hartley announced during a press conference on the steps of the county courthouse, we have a situation where the Department of Defense is spending millions of taxpayer dollars to subsidize a private business. This is corporate welfare disguised as innovation. Olivia watched the news coverage from the garage break room, her stomach knotting with familiar anxiety. She'd faced political opposition before, during her confrontation with Harrison, and she knew how quickly public opinion could shift. This is different, Dale assured her, though his voice carried uncertainty. People here know you. They've seen what you've accomplished. Politicians are skilled at making reality irrelevant, Olivia replied, remembering how Harrison had twisted her concerns 16 years earlier. If Hartley wants to make this about government waste instead of education and innovation, he might succeed. Her fears proved justified. Within days, Hartley's supporters were questioning every aspect of the program. Local newspapers received anonymous tips about excessive government spending on unproven training methods. Social media campaigns portrayed Olivia as a disgruntled former officer living off taxpayer money. The attacks culminated in a public hearing where Hartley demanded accountability for the program's costs and effectiveness. Olivia knew this was her moment of truth, the chance to defend not just her work, but the dreams of everyone who had believed in the program's mission. The courthouse was packed beyond capacity. Reporters filled the front rows, their cameras focused on Olivia as she sat at the witness table. Behind them, she could see the faces of people whose lives had been touched by the program. Danny and his family, Frank with his teenage son, Pete, accompanied by his elderly mother, Dale and his wife. Congressman Hartley opened with his standard talking points about fiscal responsibility and government overreach. His questions were designed to embarrass rather than illuminate, focusing on costs while ignoring benefits. Major Brennan, he said with theatrical concern, can you justify spending $3? $2 million of taxpayer money to train mechanics in a garage, when that same money could fund veterans' benefits or infrastructure improvements? Olivia had prepared for this question, but seeing Hartley's smug expression triggered memories of similar interrogations during her confrontation with Harrison. For a moment, she felt the familiar urge to retreat, to apologize for taking up space and resources. Then she looked past Hartley to see Danny in the audience, wearing the Army Reserve uniform he'd earned after his rapid promotion to engineering specialist. Beside him sat Frank, whose hydraulic innovations had been adopted by 3 military branches. Pete was there too, holding a certificate of commendation from the Secretary of the Army. "Congressman Hartley?" Olivia said, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "I can justify every penny, but more importantly, I can prove that those dollars have produced something invaluable. People who are prepared to serve their country with both skill and integrity." "Pretty words," Hartley replied dismissively. "But what tangible results can you show? What measurable return on investment?" Olivia stood, her movement drawing every eye in the courthouse. She had learned over 16 years of hiding and 3 months of rebuilding that some moments demanded presence rather than words. "Danny Martinez," she called out. "Would you stand, please?" Danny rose from his seat, his Army Reserve insignia catching the light. 3 months ago, Danny was changing oil and rotating tires. Today he's designing hydraulic systems for tactical vehicles. Last week, his innovation saved the Army $14 million in procurement costs. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Hartley's expression tightened. "Frank Williams, please stand." Frank rose awkwardly, still uncomfortable with public attention. Frank spent 25 years believing he wasn't smart enough for anything beyond basic mechanical work. Last month, he identified a critical flaw in tank transmission systems that could have caused catastrophic failures in combat zones. His diagnostic method is now being taught at the Army's primary maintenance training facility. More murmurs, louder now. Hartley tried to interrupt, but Olivia continued. "Pete Patterson, please stand." Pete stood with quiet dignity, his mother beaming beside him. Pete discovered he had severe dyslexia, which explained his struggles with traditional education. When we adapted our teaching methods to his learning style, he revealed an extraordinary ability to understand complex electronic systems. He's now developing diagnostic protocols that will be used in every military vehicle produced in the next decade. The courthouse had fallen completely silent, except for the clicking of camera shutters. Congressman Hartley asked for measurable returns on investment. Olivia continued, her voice growing stronger. "Here's what $2 million has produced. 3 men who went from changing oil to designing the future of military technology. Diagnostic innovations that will save hundreds of millions in maintenance costs. Training protocols that will be implemented nationwide." She paused, looking directly at Hartley. "Most importantly, proof that talent exists everywhere, if we're willing to invest in developing it." She gestured toward the audience, where dozens of people had gathered to support the program. "Look around this room, Congressman. These are the faces of America's hidden potential. These are the people who will solve tomorrow's problems if we give them today's opportunities. Every dollar invested in their education and training returns tenfold in innovation, service, and national security." The silence stretched as Hartley seemed to struggle for a response. Finally, he managed, "That's very inspiring, Major Brennan, but inspiration doesn't justify taxpayer expenditure." "Doesn't it?" Olivia asked quietly. "When inspiration produces innovation that saves lives and money, when it transforms unemployed workers into highly skilled technicians, when it proves that America's greatest resource isn't our technology or our military hardware, it's our people?" She walked closer to Hartley's table, her presence commanding the room's attention. "You want to know about waste, Congressman? Waste is having brilliant people change oil for 20 years because nobody recognized their potential. Waste is losing lives because our equipment fails and we don't have enough skilled people to fix it. Waste is building walls between civilian and military communities instead of bridges that make us all stronger." Olivia returned to her seat, but her voice carried clearly through the silent courthouse. "This program doesn't waste taxpayer money, it multiplies it. Every dollar invested here produces engineers, innovations, and capabilities that didn't exist before. More importantly, It produces citizens who understand that their value isn't determined by their starting point, but by their willingness to grow. The hearing continued for another hour, but the tone had shifted completely. Hartley's questions became increasingly defensive, while Olivia's supporters provided testimony about the program's impact. Military officials presented data showing cost savings and efficiency improvements. Local business owners spoke about increased economic activity and community pride. When the hearing concluded, Olivia felt cautiously optimistic. She had defended her work honestly and thoroughly, but political decisions weren't always based on facts or logic. That evening, as she cleaned up the garage after another busy day, her phone rang with a call from Colonel Westfield. "Olivia, I wanted you to hear this directly from me. Congressman Hartley just announced that he's withdrawing his opposition to the program. More than that, he's requesting additional funding to expand it to other districts." Olivia sank into a chair, overwhelmed by relief and exhaustion. What changed his mind? According to his staff, he spent the afternoon talking to Danny, Frank, and Pete. Apparently, hearing their stories directly, not filtered through political rhetoric, made him understand what you've actually accomplished here. As Olivia ended the call with Colonel Westfield, she realized that her quiet life in Pine Ridge was evolving into something she never could have imagined. The past she'd tried so hard to escape had not only caught up with her but was now becoming integrated with the present she'd built. The result was something entirely new, a future defined not by running away, but by standing firmly in her truth. The transformation of Murphy's truck repair had begun to attract national attention. What started as a local story about a hidden military engineer had evolved into a broader narrative about untapped potential in rural America. Major news networks sent reporters to profile the quote, a garage academy, as people had begun calling it. Educational journals published articles about Olivia's unconventional teaching methods. Military publications highlighted the innovations emerging from this unlikely collaboration between civilian mechanics and Army engineers. 1 year later, Olivia stood before a gathering that would have been unimaginable when she first arrived in Pine Ridge. The garage had expanded into 3 connected buildings, housing classrooms, laboratories, and workshop spaces that buzzed with activity from dawn until well past sunset. The Pine Ridge Institute for Applied Engineering had become a model studied by educators and military planners worldwide. But the most remarkable transformation wasn't in the buildings or equipment. It was in the people. Danny Martinez adjusted his newly earned bachelor's degree hood as he prepared to address the graduating class of 27 students. As the Institute's first graduate to complete a full engineering program while maintaining his technician duties, he had become a symbol of what was possible when opportunity met determination. 16 years ago, Danny began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment, I thought my ceiling was changing oil and rotating tires. I never imagined standing here with an engineering degree, speaking to people who will design the future. In the audience, Olivia felt tears threatening as she watched her first student embrace his potential fully. Beside him on the platform sat Frank, now the Institute's head of hydraulic systems training, and Pete, who had overcome his learning challenges to become a specialist in adaptive diagnostic technologies. The graduation ceremony represented more than individual achievements. It marked the maturation of an idea that had seemed impossible when Olivia first proposed combining practical training with theoretical education in a small-town garage. Colonel Westfield, now the Pentagon's liaison for civilian-military training partnerships, served as the keynote speaker. His presence symbolized how dramatically relationships could evolve when institutional rigidity gave way to innovative thinking. When I first heard about Major Brennan's program, Westfield told the gathered families and dignitaries, I made the mistake of judging it by conventional military standards rather than by its results. That mistake taught me something invaluable. The greatest threats to our national security aren't external enemies. They're internal assumptions that blind us to innovative solutions. He gestured toward the graduates, who represented a diverse cross-section of backgrounds and ages. Former factory workers sat beside recent high school graduates. Veterans transitioning to civilian careers shared the stage with career changers seeking new challenges. These graduates prove that talent isn't distributed according to our preconceptions. It exists everywhere, waiting for someone brave enough to nurture it and patient enough to develop it. As Westfield concluded his remarks, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The painful betrayal that had driven her from the army now seemed like a necessary detour, rather than a devastating defeat. Without that confrontation with Harrison, she never would have discovered the satisfaction of building something new rather than simply advancing something existing. Her phone buzzed with a message from General Garrison. "Congratulations on today's graduation. Offer to join Army Research Command still stands. Your innovations are changing military preparedness." Olivia deleted the message without responding, as she had done with similar offers from military executives and government officials who suddenly wanted to associate themselves with the Institute's success. She had learned that some victories were too important to risk by returning to the institutions that had once betrayed her principles. "Professor Brennan?" She turned to find Sarah Martinez, Danny's wife, holding their youngest daughter. "Danny wanted me to give you this." Sarah handed her a framed photograph showing the Institute's first day of operation. Olivia barely recognized herself in the image, tentative, defensive, still carrying the wounds of her military exile. Beside her stood Danny, Frank, and Pete, their faces mixing hope with skepticism as they embarked on an uncertain experiment. "He says this is where everything changed," Sarah continued, "not just for him, but for all of us." As the ceremony concluded and families gathered for celebration, Olivia found herself standing alone on the small stage, looking out over the crowd of graduates, families, and supporters. The scene reminded her of countless military ceremonies she had attended in her former life, but the energy was completely different. Those events had been about hierarchy and institutional achievement. This celebration was about collaboration and personal transformation. People weren't networking for career advantage. They were sharing genuine joy in each other's success. "Major Brennan." She turned to find Dale approaching with a package wrapped in brown paper. His garage had evolved into the Institute's administrative headquarters, but he had retained his title as Chief of Practical Operations, a role that perfectly suited his blend of business sense and mechanical wisdom. "The town council wanted me to give you this," Dale said, his voice thick with emotion. Olivia unwrapped the package to reveal a wooden plaque bearing the key to the city and an inscription. "To Major Olivia Brennan, who taught us that the greatest strength is lifting others up." "The ceremony's nice," Olivia said, accepting the honor with genuine gratitude, "but the real reward is watching people discover what they're capable of." "Speaking of which," Dale replied, "I have some news. The Department of Defense has approved funding for 5 additional institutes. They want to use our model in communities across the country." Olivia felt the familiar mixture of pride and apprehension that accompanied every expansion opportunity. Growth was necessary for impact, but it also risked diluting the personal connections that made the institute special. "Who would run them?" she asked. "Graduates from our program. Danny has agreed to establish the first one in Arizona. Frank's interested in the Pacific Northwest location. Pete wants to stay here and develop online training modules that can support all the institutes." The beauty of the plan struck Olivia immediately. Rather than expanding through institutional acquisition or government mandate, the institute would grow organically through people who understood its mission from personal experience. As the celebration continued into the evening, Olivia found herself walking through the original garage bay where everything had begun. The space now served as a museum of sorts, preserving the tools and workstations that had witnessed her transformation from exile to educator. Her father's photograph sat on her old workbench, the one she'd kept hidden in her locker for so many years. His words remained as relevant now as they had been during her darkest moments. "Remember who you are. Expertise doesn't require recognition to be valuable." She traced the frame gently, thinking about how those words had guided her through betrayal, humiliation, and ultimately, redemption. But the redemption hadn't come through vindication or revenge. It had come through discovering that her greatest talent wasn't designing military vehicles, but designing opportunities for others to discover their own potential. "Olivia?" She turned to find Danny standing in the doorway, his graduation gown still wrinkled from enthusiastic embraces. "Thank you," he said simply, "for seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself." "You did the work," Olivia replied. "I just provided the opportunity." "No," Danny said, shaking his head. "You provided something more important than opportunity. You provided belief. You made me understand that my value wasn't determined by other people's expectations. As Danny left to rejoin his celebration, Olivia remained in the quiet garage, surrounded by the tools and memories that had reshaped her understanding of success, purpose, and fulfillment. 16 years ago, she had arrived in Pine Ridge broken by betrayal and convinced that her career was over. Tonight, she stood in the same spot as the founder of an educational movement that was transforming lives across the country. The irony wasn't lost on her. In trying to disappear, she had discovered her true calling. In accepting what seemed like failure, she had found a success more meaningful than any military commendation. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Major Brennan, I'm a single father in Oklahoma whose daughter wants to be a mechanic but dreams of being an engineer. I heard about your institute on the news. Is there hope for someone like her? Olivia smiled as she typed her response. There's always hope. Talent exists everywhere. Sometimes it just needs the right environment to flourish. Let's talk about making her dreams possible. As she turned off the lights and locked the garage, Olivia reflected on the question that had haunted her since the day Captain Reed first challenged her competence. If you found yourself dismissed and underestimated, would you speak up immediately or let your actions speak for you? She had learned that the answer wasn't either/or. Sometimes dignity required silence while you built strength. Sometimes justice demanded speaking truth to power. But always, the most powerful response was creating opportunities for others to discover their own voices. The Institute's impact continued to grow, rippling outward in ways Olivia could never have anticipated. Former students became instructors, carrying the methodology to new communities. Military officials who had once dismissed the program now advocated for its expansion. Educational institutions that had initially refused to grant credit for the practical training now sent representatives to study its effectiveness. 6 months after Danny's graduation, Olivia received an unexpected visitor. The Institute's reception area called to inform her that General Thomas Harrison, the man whose threats had driven her into hiding 16 years earlier, was requesting a meeting. Olivia's first instinct was to refuse. Harrison had been forced to resign from the Army following the Justice Department's investigation, his reputation in tatters. But curiosity and a sense that this confrontation was necessary for her own closure led her to agree. Harrison looked smaller than she remembered. Older, diminished, a man whose authority had been stripped away along with his uniform. He sat awkwardly in the chair across from her desk, his civilian clothes hanging loosely on his frame. Major Brennan, he began, then corrected himself. Dr. Brennan, thank you for seeing me. Olivia said nothing, waiting. I've been following your work here, Harrison continued. It's impressive, very impressive. Thank you, Olivia replied neutrally. What can I do for you, Mr. Harrison? He winced slightly at the civilian address. I wanted to see for myself what you've built, and to say something that's long overdue. Harrison took a deep breath. You were right about the autonomous systems, the navigation flaws, the recognition errors, all of it. I knew you were right even then. Then why did you threaten me? Why did you force me into hiding? Because admitting the flaws meant delaying deployment. Delaying deployment meant explaining to Congress why we'd spent billions on technology that wasn't ready. Explaining that to Congress meant risking future funding. Harrison's voice was bitter. The system rewards results, not caution. It punishes honesty, not failure. People died because of those decisions, Olivia said quietly. I know. Harrison's voice cracked. 3 soldiers in the first deployment. 5 more in the second. 8 civilians in a village near Kandahar when a transport vehicle misidentified a market as a threat. The weight of those deaths hung in the air between them. Why are you here? Olivia asked finally. I'm teaching an ethics course at the War College, Harrison replied. Using my own failures as a case study. Olivia couldn't hide her surprise. You're teaching ethics? Who better to explain how good intentions become moral compromises? Who better to illustrate how career ambition can override ethical judgment? Harrison met her gaze directly for the first time. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Dr. Brennan. I don't deserve it. I'm asking if you would be willing to speak to my students about the cost of moral courage and what happens when leaders lack it. The request caught Olivia off guard. 16 years ago, she had been willing to sacrifice her career to prevent the deployment of flawed systems. Now Harrison was asking her to use that experience to teach future military leaders. "I'll consider it," she said finally. Harrison nodded, rising to leave. At the door, he paused. "What you've built here, it matters. Not just the technology or the education, but the example. You're showing that institutions don't have to choose between innovation and integrity." After he left, Olivia sat for a long time, processing the encounter. Harrison's visit represented something she hadn't expected. Not vindication or apology, but the possibility that even the most entrenched systems could change if enough people were willing to challenge them. The following week brought another unexpected development. A delegation from the National Science Foundation arrived to evaluate the institute for a prestigious grant that would fund a nationwide expansion of its training model. Dr. Eleanor Reeves, the Foundation's Director of Educational Innovation, spent 3 days observing classes, interviewing students, and reviewing outcomes. On the final day, she requested a private meeting with Olivia. "I've been evaluating educational programs for 30 years, Dr. Reeves began, "and I've never seen anything quite like what you've created here." "Thank you," Olivia replied, cautious about where this was heading. Most educational innovations focus on either content delivery or assessment methods. You've reimagined the entire relationship between theoretical knowledge and practical application. Dr. Reeves leaned forward, her enthusiasm evident. "Do you realize what you've done? You've created a new educational paradigm." Olivia had never thought of her work in such grandiose terms. She had simply tried to build a program that addressed the problems she'd seen throughout her career. Engineers who didn't understand practical limitations, mechanics who lacked the theoretical background to innovate. "The Foundation wants to fund not just the expansion of your institute," Dr. Reeves continued, "but a comprehensive study of your methodology. We believe this approach could transform technical education across disciplines." The grant would provide more resources than Olivia had ever imagined, enough to establish institutes in every region of the country, to develop comprehensive curriculum materials, to train instructors in the methodology. "This is a remarkable opportunity," Olivia acknowledged. "But I have concerns about scaling too quickly. What makes our program work is the personal connection, the individual mentorship." "Precisely why we want to study it," Dr. Reeves replied, "to understand how those elements can be preserved while expanding the impact." As they discussed the details of the potential grant, Olivia realized that this represented another crossroads in her journey. The institute had grown beyond her original vision, becoming something that could potentially transform educational approaches nationwide. The question now wasn't whether to expand, but how to ensure that expansion maintained the core principles that made the program effective. Dignity for all forms of knowledge, respect for practical experience, belief in untapped potential. That evening, Olivia called a meeting of the institute's leadership team. Danny, Frank, Pete, Dale, and the newer instructors who had joined as the program grew. She presented the Foundation's proposal and her concerns about rapid expansion. "This is what we've been working toward," Danny said. "The chance to reach more people who need this opportunity." "But how do we maintain what makes us different?" Pete asked. "The personal attention, the adaptability to individual learning styles?" Frank, always the pragmatist, suggested a phased approach. "We start with 3 new locations, each led by someone who understands our values. We document everything, what works, what doesn't. We learn before we expand further." The discussion continued late into the night, with every voice contributing to the vision of how the institute could grow without losing its soul. By midnight, they had developed a detailed expansion plan that preserved the core principles while extending the opportunity to communities across the country. As the meeting concluded, Dale pulled Olivia aside. "Did you ever imagine, when you were hiding that picture in your locker, that it would lead to all this?" Olivia shook her head. "I was just trying to survive, Dale. Just trying to find a place where I could use my hands without raising questions. And instead, you built something that's changing the way people think about education and potential." Dale smiled. "Not bad for a woman with a missing finger." The next morning, Olivia walked through the Institute's main workshop, observing students engaged in various projects. A young woman was diagnosing a complex transmission issue while simultaneously explaining the underlying physics to her classmates. A veteran with prosthetic legs was demonstrating a modification he'd designed to improve stability in off-road vehicles. A teenager who had dropped out of high school was calibrating a sophisticated sensor array with remarkable precision. Each of them represented a different path to the institute, a different set of challenges overcome, but they shared a common experience. Someone had seen potential in them that traditional educational systems had missed or undervalued. Olivia's phone rang with a call from Colonel Westfield. "Have you heard the news?" he asked without preamble. "What news?" "The Army's adopting your integrated training model for all technical specialties. The Secretary of Defense just signed off on it. Every mechanic, every technician, every specialist will receive both practical and theoretical training based on your methodology." The impact of this announcement took a moment to register. The very institution that had once threatened her career was now embracing her educational approach as its standard. "That's unexpected," Olivia managed. "Not really," Westfield replied. "The data is overwhelming. Units using your graduates have reported a 64% reduction in equipment failures and a 78% improvement in field repair times. The Army may be slow to change, but it recognizes results." After ending the call, Olivia returned to observing her students. The Army's adoption of her methodology was gratifying, but it wasn't what moved her most deeply. What mattered was watching a former high school dropout discover that she had an intuitive understanding of hydraulic systems, or seeing a veteran realize that his combat experience gave him unique insights into equipment durability. These individual transformations, these moments when someone recognized their own value perhaps for the first time, these were the true measure of the Institute's success. Later that day, Olivia received a visit from a special guest, Captain Marcus Reed, whose suspicions about her missing finger had set this entire journey in motion. Now a major, Reed had become one of the Institute's strongest advocates within the Special Forces community. "I brought someone to meet you," Reed said, gesturing to a young woman in Army fatigues who stood nervously beside him. "This is Specialist Jordan Reyes. She's been maintaining our vehicles for the past year, and she has a gift for diagnostic work that reminds me of you." Specialist Reyes stepped forward, clearly intimidated. "It's an honor to meet you, Major Brennan. Your work on the autonomous navigation systems is legendary in the motor pool." "Thank you," Olivia replied, "but I'm more interested in hearing about your diagnostic work." Major Reed doesn't offer praise lightly. As Reyes began describing a particular challenge she'd solved with one of the team's vehicles, her initial nervousness gave way to confident expertise. Her hands moved expressively as she explained how she'd identified a subtle interaction between the electrical system and the transmission that conventional diagnostics had missed. Olivia listened intently, recognizing in this young specialist the same intuitive understanding of mechanical systems that had characterized her own early career. "Have you ever considered engineering school?" she asked when Reyes finished. "Ma'am, I barely finished high school," Reyes replied. "I'm not engineer material." The words echoed what Danny had said during their first real conversation, what Frank and Pete had believed about themselves, what countless talented individuals had been told throughout their lives. "Specialist Reyes, what you just described, that diagnostic process, that's engineering thinking. You're already doing the work. Formal education would just give you the language and tools to expand what you already understand." Reyes looked skeptical. "The Army doesn't usually send mechanics to engineering school." Major Reed smiled. "Actually, they do now. There's a new program specifically for technical specialists who demonstrate exceptional problem-solving abilities. Specialist Reyes would be an ideal candidate." "I don't know," Reyes hesitated. "I've never thought of myself that way." "Few of us do," Olivia said gently. "We accept the limitations others place on us, never questioning whether they're accurate. But what if those limitations are wrong? What if you're capable of far more than you've been allowed to attempt?" By the end of the conversation, Specialist Reyes had agreed to apply for the Army's new technical education program, a program that, unbeknownst to her, had been modeled on Olivia's institute. As Reed and Reyes left, Olivia was struck by the symmetry of the moment. 16 years ago, she had been forced to hide her expertise to protect herself from a system that punished honesty. Today, that same system was actively seeking out people with talent and offering them opportunities for growth. The change wasn't complete or perfect. Institutions rarely transformed quickly or thoroughly, but it was real progress. And it had begun with a simple act of courage, fixing a vehicle properly when it would have been safer to remain invisible. That evening, Olivia sat in her office reviewing applications for the Institute's next cohort. The stack of folders represented an astonishing diversity of backgrounds: former factory workers, veterans, high school graduates, career changers, each with different strengths and challenges. Traditional educational institutions might have rejected many of these applicants based on test scores or academic history, but Olivia had developed a different evaluation process, one that assessed problem-solving ability, mechanical intuition, persistence, and willingness to learn. Her phone buzzed with a message from Danny. "Just got the Arizona Institute's accreditation approved. First classes start next month. None of this would exist without you." Olivia smiled, setting down the phone to continue reviewing applications. The greatest validation of her work wasn't in recognition or expansion. It was in the ripple effect, in watching her former students become mentors and advocates, extending the opportunity to others who had been overlooked or underestimated. Her eye caught on a particular application: a woman in her 40s who had been working as a janitor at a local manufacturing plant while tinkering with machinery in her spare time. The plant manager had noticed her aptitude when she repaired an assembly line component that had stumped the maintenance team. The woman's personal statement was simple but powerful. "I've spent my life being told what I can't do. I'm ready to find out what I can do." Olivia placed the application in the accept pile without hesitation. This was exactly the kind of hidden talent the Institute was designed to nurture, someone whose potential had been obscured by circumstance or limited opportunity. As she continued reviewing applications, Olivia reflected on the question that had defined her work. What might be possible if we valued potential over credentials, if we recognized that expertise comes in many forms, if we believed that talent exists everywhere waiting to be developed? The Pine Ridge Institute was one answer to that question. The expanding network of institutes represented another. The changing practices within the military offered yet another. But the most profound answer was found in the individual stories. Danny designing hydraulic systems that saved lives, Frank revolutionizing diagnostic protocols, Pete developing adaptive learning technologies, and countless others whose talents might have remained hidden without the opportunity to develop them. These transformations didn't just change individual lives. They changed communities, institutions, and eventually entire systems of thought about who could contribute and how. The drive home took Olivia past the welcome sign that still proudly declared Pine Ridge's population and founding date, but the town she was leaving that night was fundamentally different from the one she had discovered 16 years earlier. Not because of buildings or businesses, but because of transformed perspectives and expanded possibilities. Tomorrow would bring new students, new challenges, and new opportunities to prove that potential existed everywhere if people were brave enough to nurture it. Olivia drove through the quiet streets of her adopted hometown, finally understanding that home wasn't where you came from. It was where you chose to build something lasting. And what she had built in Pine Ridge would last for generations, carried forward by people who had learned that their worth wasn't determined by their starting point, but by their willingness to lift others as they climbed. In the end, that lesson proved more valuable than any military commendation, more powerful than any institutional position, and more lasting than any individual achievement. Some victories weren't measured in patents or recognition. They were measured in transformed lives and realized dreams. And those, Olivia had discovered, were the only victories that truly mattered. 5 years after the founding of the Pine Ridge Institute, Olivia Brennan stood at the podium of the National Academy of Engineering, preparing to deliver the keynote address at their annual conference. The audience represented the elite of American technical innovation, university professors, corporate leaders, military planners, and government officials. It was a world away from Murphy's truck repair, yet the journey between those 2 points had transformed not just Olivia's life, but the lives of thousands who had followed her path. The Institute's model had expanded to 23 locations across the country, each led by graduates of the original program. More than 800 students had completed the full engineering curriculum, while maintaining their practical work as mechanics, technicians, and specialists. Their innovations had revolutionized military vehicle design, improved safety protocols, and saved billions in maintenance costs. But statistics couldn't capture the true impact of what had begun in that small Montana garage. The real measure was in the transformed lives, the expanded possibilities, the sense of dignity restored to people who had been told they weren't, quote, engineer material. When I lost my finger 16 years ago, Olivia began, holding up her left hand so the audience could see the healed-over space where her index finger had been, I also lost my identity. I went from being Major Olivia Brennan, respected military engineer, to someone in hiding, someone pretending to be less than she was to avoid detection. The auditorium was completely silent, hundreds of engineering leaders leaning forward to catch every word. For 16 years, I changed oil, rotated tires, and performed basic maintenance while hiding my knowledge of advanced systems design. I accepted being underestimated because it felt safer than being recognized. Olivia paused, looking out at the sea of faces. What I didn't realize was that I wasn't the only one hiding. All around me were people with extraordinary potential who had been told, directly or indirectly, that they didn't belong in technical fields. The mechanic, with an intuitive understanding of hydraulic systems but no formal education. The high school dropout, who could diagnose electrical problems by sound alone. The veteran whose combat experience gave him unique insights into equipment durability. She gestured to the audience. We talk about America's technical talent shortage as if it's a resource problem. It's not. It's a recognition problem. The talent exists. It's working in our garages, maintaining our equipment, solving practical problems every day. But because it doesn't come packaged in traditional credentials, we don't see it. As Olivia continued her address, she reflected on the path that had brought her to this moment. Not just the dramatic confrontation with special forces that had exposed her identity, but the smaller moments of decision that had shaped her journey. The moment she'd chosen to speak up about the Humvee's transfer case, rather than remain safely invisible. The moment she'd refused General Garrison's offer to return to traditional military engineering. The moment she'd decided to teach Danny rather than simply use his mechanical skills. Each of these choices had been driven not by career strategy, but by a commitment to integrity, to being true to her knowledge, her values, and her belief in human potential. The Pine Ridge model isn't just about technical education, Olivia told the audience. It's about recognizing that expertise comes in many forms. It's about valuing practical knowledge alongside theoretical understanding. Most importantly, it's about believing that talent exists everywhere if we're willing to nurture it. As she concluded her address, Olivia announced the Institute's most ambitious initiative yet. A national scholarship program for mechanics, technicians, and practical problem solvers who wanted to pursue engineering education while continuing their hands-on work. We're calling it the Hidden Talents Initiative, she explained. Because the greatest resource for America's technical future isn't hidden in research labs or prestigious universities. It's hidden in plain sight, in the people whose practical expertise we rely on every day but whose potential we've failed to recognize. The standing ovation that followed lasted nearly 5 minutes. As Olivia left the stage, she was approached by Dr. Eleanor Reeves, the National Science Foundation director who had provided the Institute's first major expansion grant. You've started a revolution in technical education, Dr. Reeves said, but I suspect you're just getting started. Olivia smiled. There's still so much talent to uncover. The reception following the keynote address brought a steady stream of university presidents, corporate leaders, and government officials eager to discuss partnerships with the Institute. Olivia navigated these conversations with the diplomatic skills she'd developed over years of building bridges between different worlds, the practical and theoretical, the military and civilian, the credentialed and self-taught. Amidst the crowd, she spotted a familiar face, Danny Martinez, now the director of the Arizona Institute, and a respected authority on hydraulic systems design. Beside him stood a young woman in her early 20s, watching the proceedings with wide-eyed wonder. Olivia, Danny called, waving her over. I want you to meet someone special. This is Maria Reyes, daughter of Specialist Jordan Reyes, the Army mechanic you encouraged to pursue engineering school 5 years ago. Olivia's face lit up with recognition. Of course. Your mother was with Major Reed. She had that extraordinary diagnostic insight about the electrical transmission interaction. Maria beamed. She talks about meeting you all the time. Says it changed her life. She did the work, Olivia replied with the same words she'd once said to Danny. I just recognized what was already there. Mom's finishing her master's degree now, Maria continued proudly. And I'm following in her footsteps, first-year engineering student at the Arizona Institute, with an incredible aptitude for materials science, Danny added. She's developed a composite heat shield that outperforms anything currently used in military vehicles. The pride in Danny's voice was unmistakable. The same pride Olivia had felt watching him discover his own potential years earlier. The cycle was continuing, each generation lifting the next. Later that evening, Olivia retreated to her hotel room, processing the day's events. Her phone buzzed with a message from Colonel Westfield, now General Westfield, head of the Army's Technical Innovation Command. Saw your speech online. Standing ovation at the Pentagon, too. The Army Chief of Staff wants to meet with you about making the Hidden Talents Initiative part of standard military training protocol. Olivia smiled at the irony. The same institution that had once threatened her career now wanted to adopt her educational philosophy as standard practice. The change hadn't come through confrontation or vindication, but through demonstrated results. Through the undeniable success of people like Danny, Frank, Pete, and countless others whose talents had flourished when given the opportunity. As she prepared for bed, Olivia's phone rang with a call from Dale Murphy, who still served as the original institute's chief of practical operations, despite numerous opportunities to move to more prestigious positions. "How was the fancy engineering conference?" Dale asked, his voice carrying the familiar warmth that had sustained her through difficult times. "Overwhelming," Olivia admitted. "Sometimes I still feel like I'm pretending like I don't belong in rooms with all those credentials and titles." Dale laughed. "Says the woman with 2 engineering doctorates and a Presidential Medal of Technology." "You know what I mean." "I do." Dale's voice grew serious. "But that's exactly why you need to be in those rooms. You remember what it feels like to be underestimated. You understand that credentials don't always reflect ability." After ending the call, Olivia stood at the hotel window, looking out at the Washington, D.C. skyline. 16 years ago, she had fled this world of power and influence, seeking anonymity in a small-town garage. Now she had returned, not as a fugitive, but as a pioneer, someone whose ideas were reshaping how America developed and recognized technical talent. The journey had come full circle, but she was not the same person who had begun it. The Olivia who had hidden her expertise out of fear had become someone who helped others reveal theirs. The engineer who had designed military vehicles had become an architect of human potential. The following morning brought another milestone in the Institute's evolution. Olivia had been invited to the White House to brief the President's Council on Science and Technology about the Hidden Talents Initiative. The meeting represented an opportunity to elevate the Institute's approach from a successful experiment to national policy. As her car approached the White House security checkpoint, Olivia felt a momentary flash of anxiety, the lingering trauma of having been threatened by powerful institutions. Then she remembered the words her father had written on that photograph so many years ago. "Remember who you are." Expertise doesn't require recognition to be valuable. She had carried that truth through 16 years of hiding and 5 years of building. It had sustained her when she doubted her path, and guided her when opportunities arose. Now it would accompany her into this meeting with the nation's scientific leadership. The council comprised 15 distinguished leaders from academia, industry, and government, people whose credentials and achievements would have intimidated the Olivia of 21 years ago. But the woman who entered the West Wing conference room that morning carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had found her purpose. "Dr. Brennan," the president's science advisor greeted her warmly. "Your reputation precedes you. We've been following the remarkable outcomes from the Pine Ridge Institute with great interest." "Thank you," Olivia replied. "Though I should clarify that those outcomes aren't mine alone. They belong to the students, instructors, and communities who have embraced the model." "Of course," the science advisor nodded. "But it was your vision that made it possible. Your willingness to see potential where others saw only limitations." The briefing that followed was more conversation than presentation. The council members asked probing questions about the Institute's methodology, outcomes, and scalability. They were particularly interested in how the program identified promising candidates who lacked traditional academic backgrounds. "We've developed what we call the Applied Problem-Solving Assessment," Olivia explained. "Instead of testing theoretical knowledge or academic preparation, it evaluates how people approach real-world technical challenges. Can they diagnose complex problems? Do they recognize patterns? Can they improvise solutions with limited resources? And this has proven more predictive of success than traditional metrics," asked the Dean of Engineering from a prestigious university. "For our population, absolutely," Olivia confirmed. "We've found that practical problem-solving ability, combined with perseverance and curiosity, is a stronger predictor of engineering potential than prior academic performance. The Council's questions continued for over 2 hours, delving into every aspect of the Institute's approach. Throughout the discussion, Olivia found herself thinking of Danny, Frank, Pete, and the countless others whose journeys had informed the model she was describing. Their stories, their transformations, were the evidence that supported every claim she made. As the meeting concluded, the science advisor made an unexpected proposal. "Dr. Brennan, the president has asked me to extend an invitation. He would like you to serve as the first director of technical talent development, a new position focused on identifying and nurturing non-traditional pathways into STEM fields." The offer caught Olivia completely off guard. It represented an opportunity to influence national policy, to bring the Institute's philosophy to every corner of American technical education. "I'm honored," she said carefully, "but I would need to understand how this role would relate to my commitments to the Pine Ridge Institute and its affiliated programs." "We're not asking you to abandon what you've built," the science advisor assured her. "Rather, we want to give you a platform to expand it, to make your approach part of our national strategy for technical innovation." It was, in many ways, the ultimate vindication recognition at the highest level that her approach to talent development had value. Yet Olivia found herself hesitating. Not out of fear, but out of caution. She had learned through painful experience that institutional roles often came with institutional constraints. "May I have some time to consider the offer?" "Of course," the science advisor replied. "Take all the time you need. This isn't a position we want someone to accept lightly." That evening, Olivia called a video conference with the leadership team she had built over the past 5 years. Danny, Frank, Pete, Dale, and the directors of the other institutes across the country. She shared the White House offer and her conflicted feelings about it. "This is incredible," Danny said immediately. "A chance to influence national policy on technical education. You have to take it." "But what about the institutes?" Olivia asked. "What about the day-to-day work with students and communities?" Frank, always the pragmatist, offered his perspective. "The institutes are stable now. We have leadership teams, curriculum, methodologies. Maybe your role needs to evolve from building the first model to creating the conditions for many models." "I'm concerned about the political dimensions," Pete added. "What happens when administrations change? When priorities shift?" The institutes have been successful partly because they're independent. The discussion continued for hours, with each person offering insights based on their unique experience with the program. Throughout the conversation, Olivia was struck by the growth she witnessed in her former students. Not just their technical knowledge, but their strategic thinking, their nuanced understanding of institutional dynamics, their commitment to the core mission. "Whatever you decide," Dale said as the call was ending, "remember that your greatest contribution isn't any single institution or program. It's the idea that talent exists everywhere if we're willing to look for it differently. That idea can't be contained by any role or title." The following week brought another perspective on her decision. Major Reed, now Colonel Reed, requested a meeting to discuss the White House offer. They met at a small cafe near the Pentagon, away from the formality of military or government offices. "I hear the president wants to steal you from us." Reed began with a smile. "News travels fast," Olivia observed. "In certain circles." Reed stirred his coffee thoughtfully. "I wanted to share something with you before you make your decision." He handed her a folder containing photographs and brief biographies of 12 military personnel, mechanics, technicians, specialists from various branches of service. These are the first graduates of the Military Technical Talent Program, the initiative we modeled after your institute. Every one of them was a hands-on technical specialist who showed exceptional problem-solving ability. Every one of them has now completed engineering training while maintaining their practical roles. Olivia paged through the folder, noting the diverse backgrounds and specializations represented. Impressive results. "That's not why I'm showing you this," Reed said. Turn to the last page. The final document in the folder was a memorandum analyzing the program's impact on military readiness. The statistics were remarkable. 62% reduction in critical equipment failures, 74% improvement in field repair times, 81% increase in successful equipment adaptations for specific mission requirements. These numbers validate everything you've been saying for years, Reed continued. But again, that's not my point. What is your point, Colonel? Reed leaned forward, his expression intense. My point is that this happened because you refused to return to traditional military engineering, because you insisted on building something new rather than rejoining something established, because you stayed true to your vision, even when it would have been easier to accept General Garrison's offer. Olivia considered this perspective. You think I shouldn't take the White House position. I think you should recognize that your influence comes from your independence, Reed replied. From your ability to demonstrate alternatives rather than just advocate for them. The moment you become part of the system, your ability to transform it may actually diminish. It was a compelling argument, and one that resonated with Olivia's own instincts. Throughout her journey, her most significant impacts had come not from formal authority, but from practical demonstration, from showing what was possible, rather than just talking about it. The following day, Olivia met with the president's science advisor to discuss the offer. Rather than simply declining, she proposed an alternative arrangement. I believe I can contribute more effectively as an advisor than as a director, she explained. The strength of the Institute model comes from its connection to communities, its responsiveness to local needs, its independence from changing political priorities. I want to maintain that position while helping shape national policy. The science advisor seemed disappointed but not surprised. The president suspected you might feel that way. He asked me to convey that if you won't accept the directorship, he would welcome your participation on a special commission on technical talent development. You would retain your independence while helping guide national strategy. This compromise appealed to Olivia. It would allow her to influence policy without becoming entangled in bureaucracy, to advocate for non-traditional pathways without abandoning the model she had built. I would be honored to serve on the commission, she said. 3 months later, Olivia stood in the original garage bay of Murphy's Truck Repair, now preserved as the historical heart of the Pine Ridge Institute. A film crew was documenting the Institute's journey for a documentary on innovation in technical education, and they had asked to interview her where it all began. What do you see when you look around this space? The interviewer asked. Olivia ran her hand along the workbench, where she had spent countless hours changing oil, rotating tires, and performing basic maintenance while hiding her knowledge of advanced systems. I see transformation, she replied, not just of this space from a garage to an institute, but of people from underestimated to empowered. I see Danny Martinez discovering that he had an extraordinary talent for hydraulic systems design. I see Frank Williams realizing that his practical knowledge of engines gave him insights that purely theoretical engineers missed. I see Pete Patterson learning that his learning disability wasn't a limitation but a different way of understanding mechanical relationships. And what do you see when you look at yourself? The interviewer asked. The question gave Olivia pause. She had spent so much time focusing on her students' transformations that she rarely reflected on her own. I see someone who found her purpose through loss, she said finally. Losing my finger in that accident with the autonomous vehicle, that was the beginning of 16 years of hiding. But it was also the beginning of understanding that our greatest contributions often come from our deepest wounds. She held up her left hand, showing the space where her index finger had been. This missing finger forced me to adapt, to find new ways of doing familiar tasks. That experience taught me that limitations can become innovations if we approach them with creativity rather than resignation. Is that the philosophy behind the Institute? The interviewer pressed. Partly, Olivia acknowledged. But there's something more fundamental. When I was hiding my expertise, pretending to be just a basic mechanic, I experienced what so many talented people feel every day. The frustration of being underestimated, the pain of having abilities that no one recognizes, the sense that you have more to offer than you're being allowed to give. She paused, gathering her thoughts. The Institute was born from that recognition, from understanding that talent exists everywhere, not just in people with credentials or degrees or conventional backgrounds. It exists in the mechanic who can diagnose a problem by sound alone, in the technician who improvises solutions with limited resources, in the specialist who sees patterns that others miss. The interview continued for another hour, exploring the Institute's methodologies, outcomes, and future directions. Throughout the conversation, Olivia found herself returning to the core insight that had guided her work for the past 5 years. The greatest barriers to human potential weren't lack of ability, but lack of opportunity, lack of recognition, lack of belief, lack of pathways forward. After the film crew departed, Olivia remained in the garage, reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 21 years ago, she had been a rising star in military engineering, designing autonomous systems that promised to revolutionize battlefield logistics. Then came the discovery of fatal flaws in the navigation systems, her refusal to certify them as combat-ready, Harrison's threats, and the accident that took her finger. 16 years of hiding followed 16 years of diminishing herself, of accepting underestimation, of finding safety in anonymity. Then came the day Special Forces Captain Reed noticed her missing finger and the exceptional knowledge she had tried so hard to conceal. That moment could have been another disaster, another loss, another exile. Instead, it had become the catalyst for building something entirely new. Not a return to her former career, but the creation of a pathway for others whose talents had been overlooked or undervalued. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unfamiliar number. "Dr. Brennan, my name is Thomas Martinez. I'm a high school janitor in New Mexico with a knack for fixing things. I heard about your Hidden Talents initiative on the news. Is there really a place for someone like me in engineering?" Olivia smiled as she typed her response. "Mr. Martinez, engineering is precisely for people like you, people who solve practical problems, who understand how things work, who see possibilities where others see limitations. The nearest institute to you is in Arizona. Let me connect you with the director there." As she sent the message, Olivia realized that this moment of opening a door for someone who had been told explicitly or implicitly that certain paths weren't for them, this was the true measure of her work success. Not the national recognition, not the policy influence, not even the statistical outcomes, impressive though they were. The real impact was in these individual connections, these moments when someone who had been defined by limitations suddenly glimpsed their own potential. Her phone rang with a call from Danny. The Commission's policy recommendations were accepted, he reported excitedly. The Department of Education is establishing a national technical talent identification program based on our applied problem-solving assessment. They're projecting it will identify 50,000 potential engineers who would have been missed by traditional metrics. "That's extraordinary," Olivia replied, feeling a surge of satisfaction at the prospect of so many hidden talents being recognized. "And there's more," Danny continued. "The Defense Department is expanding the military technical talent program to all branches of service. Colonel Reed says it's going to fundamentally change how the military develops and utilizes technical expertise." After ending the call, Olivia walked through the Institute's main workshop, observing students engaged in various projects. The scene never failed to inspire her. The concentration on their faces, the confidence in their movements, the pride in their accomplishments. A young woman was calibrating a complex electronic system while explaining the process to her classmates. A veteran with a prosthetic leg was demonstrating a modification he'd designed to improve vehicle accessibility. A former factory worker was analyzing material stresses in a new composite he had developed. Each of them had a story, a path that had led them to this place, this moment of discovery and growth. Each of them represented potential that might have remained untapped without the opportunity the Institute provided. Olivia's attention was drawn to a new student working intently at a diagnostic station. The young woman's left hand was missing not just a finger but the entire hand, replaced by a sophisticated prosthesis that she operated with remarkable dexterity. "Impressive work," Olivia commented, observing the complex fuel injection system the student was analyzing. "Thank you, Dr. Brennan," the young woman replied, looking up with a smile of recognition. "I'm Jordan Reyes's daughter. We met at the engineering conference last year. Mom suggested I apply to the Institute after I lost my hand in an accident." "I remember," Olivia said warmly. "Maria, right?" "Danny mentioned your work with composite materials." Maria nodded. "That's still my primary focus, but I'm branching into fuel systems now. The prosthetic has actually given me some insights into interface design that I might have missed otherwise." The parallels weren't lost on Olivia. Another generation finding strength in what might have been perceived as limitation, discovering new perspectives through adaptation. "Your mother must be proud," she said. "She is," Maria confirmed. "She says meeting you changed everything for her, made her realize that her practical knowledge was valuable, that she could contribute at a higher level." "She did the work," Olivia replied with the phrase that had become almost a mantra. "I just recognized what was already there." "That's what Mom says you'd say," Maria laughed. "But recognition matters. Being seen matters. You understand that better than most." As Maria returned to her work, Olivia was struck by the continuity represented in that moment, the way influence flowed from one generation to the next, each building on the foundation laid by those who came before. 16 years ago, she had been hiding in a small-town garage, afraid that her expertise would be discovered. Now she stood in an institute that bore her name, surrounded by people whose talents were being celebrated rather than concealed. The journey from there to here hadn't been straightforward or easy. It had involved confronting powerful institutions, challenging entrenched assumptions, building new models when existing ones proved inadequate. It had required courage, persistence, and an unwavering belief in human potential. But the results, the transformed lives, the expanded opportunities, the innovations that might otherwise never have emerged, these made every challenge worthwhile. As Olivia walked through the institute that had grown from Murphy's truck repair, she carried with her the memory of that first moment of decision. The moment when Special Forces had questioned her about a missing finger, and she had chosen to reveal rather than conceal her expertise. That choice, that willingness to step forward rather than remain hidden, had set in motion everything that followed. It had been the first step in a journey from anonymity to purpose, from hiding potential to helping others discover theirs. In the end, Olivia reflected, that was perhaps the most important lesson of her journey. Our greatest contributions often begin with a single choice, a decision to speak rather than remain silent, to build rather than simply endure, to transform limitation into possibility. Her missing finger, once a source of shame and concealment, had become a symbol of that transformation. It represented not what she had lost, but what she had found, a new purpose, a new community, a new understanding of success. As she completed her walk through the institute, Olivia returned to her office, a space that balanced practicality with inspiration. Engineering diagrams shared wall space with photographs of graduates. Technical manuals sat alongside student projects. The decor reflected the philosophy that had guided her work, the integration of theoretical knowledge and practical application, of formal education and hands-on experience. On her desk sat the framed photograph her father had given her, the one she had kept hidden in her locker for 16 years. Beside it stood the key to the city of Pine Ridge and the Presidential Medal of Technology she had received for her contributions to technical education. These symbols of her journey, from military engineer to small-town mechanic to educational innovator, reminded her daily of the unexpected paths that lead to purpose, of the transformative power of seeing potential where others see only limitations. Her phone buzzed with another message, another person reaching out after hearing about the Hidden Talents Initiative, another opportunity to open a door that might otherwise have remained closed. This, Olivia knew, was her true legacy, not the buildings or programs or policies, but the people whose lives had been transformed by the recognition of their talents, by the belief in their potential, by the opportunity to develop abilities that might otherwise have remained hidden. And it had all begun with a missing finger, with a moment of exposure that could have led to further concealment, but instead became the catalyst for revelation. Sometimes, Olivia reflected, our greatest strengths emerge from our most visible vulnerabilities. Sometimes the very thing we try to hide becomes the key that unlocks our purpose. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.